Hello, Kray the Krays. In the 60s, every Londoner knew about the mafioso twins, the Krays. One of them, Ronald, was bloodthirsty and unpredictable, though with a peculiar sense of humor. The other, Reginald, was much more sensible, but just as capable of fighting back against anyone who got in his way. Both had been promising boxers in their youth, but their bad temper and willfulness derailed their careers. After that, they set a different goal for themselves, to take over the whole of London. One day, Reggie Kray notices that he is being followed. The cops are keeping watch outside his house in a car, not even trying to conceal themselves. Reggie generously brings them 2 cups of tea.
Rapists and murderers, you gotta lock away, ain't it? But where do you take a turd in there?
Having mocked them enough, he pours the tea on the sidewalk and goes with his partner in crime to pick up his driver, Frank, who has overslept. There he meets the guy's sister, the beautiful Frances, who is munching on candy.
That's not any sweet, is it? That's the lemon sherbet, that is. My 5 crack.
All right.
Reggie asks the girl on a date. His determination and charm work, and Frances agrees. Frances's mother tries to prevent the dangerous encounter and drives her daughter back into the house. Reggie picks up Frank and warns him that next time, he will be fired. They shake Detective Nipper and arrive at the psychiatric hospital where Ron Kray is being held. He had almost served his 3-year sentence for grievous bodily harm, but before he got out of prison, he was declared insane, and the man got stuck in an asylum. However, judging by Ron's delirium, he's right where he belongs. He now believes that he can influence his neighbors with his mind so that they give him their sausages. To get his brother out, Reggie sends one of his men to a psychiatrist. The big guy threatens the doctor with violence if he does not issue a report that Ron has recovered and can be released. The psychiatrist chooses to stay alive, but afterwards finds Reggie to warn him.
Your brother has no real idea who or what he is, nor does he trust his own senses.
He explains that Ron has paranoid schizophrenia and needs to take pills twice a day. Reggie takes the medicine with him. It's time for the date, and Frances's mother tries unsuccessfully to dissuade the girl from having an affair with the criminal. But the girl is already in love and goes with the man to his own nightclub. There, she meets many movie stars mixed in with gangsters and boxers from the streets. One of his men interrupts Reggie about an urgent matter. Jack, aka the Hat, has been caught stealing from the general treasury, and the boss settles the matter with a sharp punch to his face. After which, Reggie demands that no one bothers him again that evening. Frances asks if her companion likes being a gangster, but Reggie dodges the question. He assures her that he simply owns the club. What he likes is money and respect, and that he got it all on his own. Frances gives him a passionate kiss. After a while, Reggie introduces his beloved to his brother. They arrive in the woods, where Ron has made a home for himself and his friend. He describes his love relationship to Frances in detail, making her uncomfortable.
You should not hide what you are. You shouldn't hide what you are because it makes you very, very sad.
He also declares that he and Reggie will take over all of London. Such future worries the girl. The rival of the Krays in their struggle for power are the Richardsons from South London, aka the Torture Gang, who conduct demonstrative beatings and executions. The Torture Gang catch the Kray brothers' men on their territory and soon run over Reggie with a car to scare him off. In response, a truck crashes into the Richardsons' cafe at full throttle. Soon, the twins are summoned to negotiate, but the Torture Gang's boss, Charlie Richardson, doesn't show up himself, sending his goons instead. The brothers walk into a bar, where they get surrounded by an armed gang. Ron is outraged by the feeble weapons they are about to use, and he heads for the door.
Gangster. A shootout, right? It's a fucking shootout!
He yells that his time has been wasted and leaves his brother alone. But Reggie stays just as calm and pours himself a beer. Afterwards, he shows off his brass knuckles and starts telling a joke about a schizophrenic man that walks into a bar. At this time, Ron is already sneaking up on the guests from behind with 2 hammers in his hands. Reggie shows his boxing skills while Ron goes on a rampage. The bar is littered with injured enemies, and London is saved from a full-scale clan war by the police. Soon they arrest Charlie Richardson and sentence him to 25 years on a combination of charges. The Krays, without thinking twice, take over the competitor's territory and acquire more and more property in London. They are helped by the intermediary, Leslie Payne, a master of manipulation and blackmail. He offers Reggie to cooperate with the American Mafia, which is ready to invest a lot of money in London. Ron, who prefers simple robbery and racketeering, strongly dislikes Leslie. In spite of this, Reggie listens to the advisor and strikes an agreement with the Americans. At the meeting, Ron again goes into unnecessary detail about his personal life, but it does not hamper the business for now. Reggie runs a casino where all of London's rich people gather and enjoys his time with Frances. On Christmas Day, however, Reggie must turn himself into the police because of a criminal case brought against him. The sentence is short, only 6 months, but it still makes Francis very sad. In prison, the guards brutally beat the arrogant crime lord as an example for the other inmates. However, Reggie manages to steal a pair of handcuffs unnoticed and avenge the warden to the applause of his fellow inmates. While one brother is incarcerated, the other's having schizophrenic progress. Ron asks Leslie to give him £50,000 for a trip to Nigeria.
I want to build a city in Nigeria for the children.
They have an argument in which Ron threatens Leslie with violence. The only thing that stops him is the fact Reggie has vouched for the guy. Frances goes on a date at the prison, where she sees the bruises on her lover's face. She is increasingly doubtful whether she has committed her life to the right man. Nevertheless, she loves Reggie too much, and she admits it to him. To keep their relationship from falling apart, Frances suggests that he stop breaking the law when he gets out of prison. Reggie doubts that this is possible. One night, Ron gets bored at a club and decides to go on stage and show his talent as a trumpeter. This does not really impress anyone, and an offended Ron begins to insult the audience. Soon, Reggie gets out of jail and visits Frances. To avoid confronting her mother, the man climbs up a drainpipe and proposes to the girl. He vows to live by the law from now on. Frances is overjoyed and says yes. Reggie takes her with him to the club. There, he sees that Ron has finally scared away all the guests with his antics. Next week, it's time to pay taxes, and that will finally bankrupt the business. Reggie loses his temper and blames his brother for the failure. Frances tries to lead her fiancé out, and Ron insults her for interfering in their argument. Instead of apologizing, he further insults the girl, and Reginald throws his twin to the floor. A fight ensues, which starts with slapping, but Ron quickly moves on to forbidden techniques. To keep his manhood, Reggie breaks his brother's nose, and the latter retaliates by throwing bottles, hitting the guests. In the end, Reggie wins and knocks his brother down in front of Frances, who runs away in shock. The brothers reconcile, and Ron hugs Reggie in tears, apologizing for everything. Later, Reginald apologizes to Frances and convinces her that Ron did something stupid because he didn't take the pills. The promise he made to not break the law still stands. Meanwhile, Ron develops a friendship with a prominent politician who becomes a guest at his parties and gets caught in the crosshairs of the police. The news reaches the upper-class authorities. To live off the money from legitimate business, Reggie decides to buy another club and operate it alone. Upon learning of this, Ronald freaks out that his brother is going to leave him. He sends his henchmen to ransack the club and sabotage the deal. The owner of the establishment reports this to the police, and both brothers are arrested. Yet they still manage to raise a scandal before the election by publishing photos of Ron and his politician friend. In order not to lose their reputation, the party leaders press the judges, and the brothers are acquitted. After that, Reggie becomes the owner of the club after all, and Detective Nipper, upset by the failure of justice, visits him there. The man reveals that he too grew up poor and was a boxer. However, eventually, he became a policeman instead of a criminal.
It did turn you into handing your own over at the bar, didn't it?
Their dialogue is interrupted by Ron, who comes up next to him for a nice group photo. This kind of footage looks extremely bad for the detective's reputation, and his boss removes him from the case. The day of Frances's and Reginald's wedding arrives. The celebration is marred by Frances's mother, who arrives at the church dressed entirely in black. Before the bride walks down the aisle, the mother again warns her daughter of the mistake she is making, but Frances is adamant. After the honeymoon, Reggie forgets his vows to his wife and returns to a life of crime. The newlyweds move into an apartment directly below Ron. Parties keep Frances up at night, and her husband is hardly ever home. The Krays family shows no respect for their daughter-in-law, and the girl becomes increasingly depressed. The only thing that saves her are large doses of sleeping pills and antidepressants.
They were like friends who held no judgment and only wanted to be loved in return.
Reggie only displays his love with expensive gifts. Although the girl does not know how to drive a car, she becomes the owner of a sports convertible. The husband has no time to teach his wife how to drive. At the bar, Leslie informs the brothers that business is going well, and they should give up their old violent ways because people increasingly want to do business with them. But Ron doesn't want to give up fighting and robbery and breaks a glass on the loudmouth's head. Reggie is furious with his brother and accuses him of stopping taking his pills. Ron suspects that Leslie knows too much and might turn them in, but the brother replies that every member of their gang knows enough to put the twins in prison for the rest of their lives. Since the paranoid man doesn't trust anyone, he would probably like the idea of killing their whole crew, and in the end the brothers would kill each other as well, so that there would be no witnesses. The Americans are also unhappy about Ron's condition. The newspapers write too much about them. Reginald, however, stands by his brother to the end. Frances, meanwhile, is feeling increasingly worse. Her ever-busy husband completely ignores her. When a member of the Richardson gang carries out a racket on the brothers' property, one of the victims, a shopkeeper, complains to Ron. The madman demands more money from the poor fellow, but in return, promises to deal with the offender. He finds him in a bar and puts a bullet in his head in front of 7 witnesses. Reggie finds his brother at his parents' house, sipping tea as if nothing had happened.
You bring this here, this is where you bring it straight to Mum's. Don't moan about it, right? It's done, innit? What are we gonna do?
Reggie helps him get rid of the evidence and demands to find witnesses to pressure them. News of the sensational murder spreads throughout London, and Nipper takes on the twins again. Francis demands that Reggie stay out of the case and let Ron go to jail. The man once again sides with his brother and blames everything his wife says on the pills she takes. At the lineup, all the witnesses refuse to identify the murderer, and Ron is released. The Kray brothers celebrate their victory, and a distraught Frances discovers that Reggie threatened the witness with their children's health. She realizes her husband will never change and says she never wants to see him again. Soon it begins to rain, and the girl tries to close the roof of the convertible, which has never moved. She can't get the mechanism to work, and drunken Reggie notices her struggle. Despite the girl's pleas for help, he begins to mock her. Frances slaps him in the face and goes back into the house. The offended man follows her, beats her up, and forces intimacy on her. The next day, Frances packs her things and leaves. She is met on the street by Ron, who supports the girl's decision.
That is bang out of order. That's not how we were brought up, not at all.
He says that their business will soon collapse because there are too many snitches around, and he's always liked Frances because she can see into the future, just like himself. After a while, Reginald visits his wife at the apartment of her brother Frank, who has also quit crime. The guy objects to the felon seeing her, but Frances comes out on her own. Reggie asks her to come back, but the girl refuses. It's important to her that the man hear her words and take her seriously. Frances is well aware that her husband enjoys the life of a gangster, and there is no room for her. But Reggie doesn't listen. He just keeps saying that he still loves his wife and wants to have children with her. He offers to buy tickets to anywhere in the world for a second honeymoon. Frances replies that she wouldn't mind visiting Ibiza and leaves. The girl feels that she cannot stop this vicious cycle. She is left alone and swallows one pill after another. A few hours later, her brother finds her on the bed with no vital signs. Reggie also arrives to say goodbye to Frances. He is shocked by this outcome and gets drunk.
What do you do, after all, when the only person who could ever get to you is gone?
Before the funeral, Reggie puts rings on Frances's finger. At the cemetery, her mother blames Kray for what has happened and showers him with curses. While Reggie is devastated with grief, Ron instructs Jack the Hat to finish off Leslie Payne, but the killer fails and only wounds the man before losing his gun and fleeing. In exchange for security guarantees, Leslie begins to cooperate with Detective Nipper. Reggie is informed that the police now know everything. Ron, meanwhile, is yet again hanging out at another party carefree. Reggie visits him there. He is shocked by his brother's insanity for the umpteenth time, but no longer tries to change the situation. Instead, Reggie slowly boils with anger, waiting for the Hat to arrive. The hapless gunslinger shows up with a stupid smirk on his face and chooses the worst words to justify himself.
It's not my fault. Frances killed herself. I never sold her the f***ing pills.
Reggie snaps and pulls the trigger despite the crowd of people around him. The gun misfires, so he pulls out a knife. Blood sprays everywhere. Now it's Ron who seems to be the more reasonable brother and asks why Reggie would do such a thing.
Because I can't kill you. No matter how much I want to.
That day marks the end of the Krays empire. Reginald was sentenced to 33 years in prison and was released early, gravely ill with cancer. He only lived at large for 8 weeks. All that time, he had carried with him the 2 tickets to Ibiza he had bought the day Frances died. Ron has spent the rest of his life in a mental institution. As always, look for the name of the movie in the video description. In the meantime, let us know in the comments, what would you do with your brother who keeps getting in trouble and ruining everything you create? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video so that more awesome stories come out as often as possible.